Hey, what's up guys, TechTine here, and this is the all-new Nokia G310 5G. So before we begin, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you go ahead and do so. More content is in the works and it's coming really soon. So let's go ahead and talk about this phone. I have a couple of things that I want to talk about, so let's start with the design itself. Now this phone has this kind of really nice blue color to it, and because of the sunset it actually reflects a little bit. It makes it look darker than what it is, but I just thought this shot would look cool. Anyway, so basically, yeah, it's a simplistic design, which some people may think, hey, that's boring. Other people may like, that's all I need. Subtlety is my thing. So it's up to you. Me personally, I really like the coloring on the back of the phone. I think it gives it a good look in my opinion. So on the back, you also have a triple camera setup with the main sensor being a 50 megapixel sensor. And you also have two additional cameras, one that would act as a 2 megapixel macro and the other one would be a 2 megapixel depth sensor. More on the camera later on in a little bit as well. But basically, the way that this camera fits in within the design of the phone is actually really good. I think Nokia did a decent job in that regard. If you look at it from the sides, you would see that it does protrude quite a bit, but it's nothing too significant that a lot of other phones already have this kind of protrusion, so it's nothing crazy, nothing too significant. As far as your ports and your connections, on the bottom of the phone you do have a couple of things. So you have your headphone jack, which you still retain in 2023, a microphone, a USB-C that can actually support up to 20-watt fast charging, and your bottom facing speaker. So I do have to say that a phone at this price range, which is between 150 to 200 bucks, that supports a 20-watt fast charging plus gives you a headphone jack if you need it and a decent speaker, is a thumbs up in my book. So also on the right hand side you do get your volume up and down as well as your power / fingerprint sensor. And I have to say, listen, from a quality standpoint, these buttons are definitely quality. They do what they do best, and they're actually more clickier than phones that are double the price of this device. It's not all pros. There are definitely some cons when it comes to this design. First being that right out of the box, this phone does feel cheap as hell. So I do have to be honest in that regard. So this phone does feel cheap when you pick it up in the hand, and you can tell that they did not use the most premium materials, but that's fine for a phone at this price point. So now let's switch the topic of conversation and talk a little bit about this display. So Nokia this time around did skimp out a little bit, actually a lot, on the display. So you do get a 6.56 inch display, 1612 by 720p. So the resolution is definitely not up to par, not as good as I would like it to be. So yeah, the resolution is not really all that crazy. However, you do get support for a 90 hertz refresh rate, or up to 90 hertz refresh rate if you need it. So that's definitely something that is added to this display, and it is an IPS LCD panel, so it's not OLED or anything like that. Listen, the display is a letdown. That's really all I can say about it. Now, as far as brightness, this does get up to 450 nits. I believe there is something called a brightness boost, which can get you up to 560 nits, which is bright, but not really that bright in outdoor conditions. So it's a hit or miss. The display is 50-50 in my book. All right, back to the camera conversation. So like I mentioned, you do have a main sensor of a 50 megapixels as well as a 2 megapixel macro and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. Now, as far as video capability, this phone does record and maxes out at 1080p at 30 or 60 frames per second. And it does have this mode called tripod mode that I'm willing to test in a future video when I do a full camera review. But as far as your camera app goes, it's very simplistic, straight to the point, and you can take pictures really quickly and smoothly and swiftly. So that's definitely at least a thumbs up in my book. And you have this 1x and 2x option. Now the 2x option really activates that macro sensor, and sometimes it's a hit or miss in my book. So sometimes it gives you a good focus and a good depth of field, sometimes it doesn't. And the colors on the camera from my testing did not seem all that crazy good, but I'll leave that for the full camera review. So if you guys are interested in seeing that, leave it in the description below. Alright, again, let's switch the topic of conversation and talk a little bit about the specs of this phone. And this is where actually things can get a little bit interesting. So as far as the specifications go, you have the following specs. So you do have a octa-core chip, and it does use the Snapdragon 480 Plus 5G. So a low budget processor, but it works. You get 4 gigabytes of RAM, and here's my favorite spec, or second favorite spec, I would say. You do get 128 gigabyte of storage standard, so phones at this price point normally give you 64, not 128. So more storage is definitely appreciated. And also you do get the nice spec of having a 5000 milliamp hour battery. So from my testing so far, the battery did not seem to be a problem. Now the processor on here is, like I said, a low budget processor, so it's not going to be the fastest thing in the world. It does the basic tasks just fine, so like browsing the web, going through social media, opening up apps and closing them, it's fairly fast. So it does well in that regard, but more testing will be done on this phone so I can give you guys a proper conclusion. As of right now, here's what I have to say about the phone off of first impression. The biggest letdown is honestly, I don't want to say the design, it's actually the display. So a higher resolution display would have definitely been appreciated. I think now I would get that some people may not really like this kind of simplistic, and some might say a boring design. I can agree with that a little bit, but I feel like the coloring, the color of this phone, this kind of blue color, gives it a better look than it should. Honestly, yeah, it's built out of plastic, but you do get quality buttons, so that's a thumbs up in my book. With that being said, tell me what you guys think. Let me know what you think of this device in the comments below, and I will definitely catch you guys in the next one.